On Thursday night when my video dropped, it happened to be at just about the same time that a mass shooting was taking place in Raleigh. Because they both hit YouTube simultaneously, people were thinking that this video was going to be about crime. I decided to take it down and address the issue of crime in Raleigh and how that's impacting whether it's still worth moving here. I've added that in a clip at the end of the video so it makes more sense in conjunction with everything else in the video. Here's take 2 of Is Raleigh Still Worth It? Recently, a viewer asked me to do a video about whether Raleigh is still a good place to purchase a home. People seem to be worried that housing prices aren't stable or that they're going to buy a home and then their home will immediately drop in value. If you've been watching or reading the national news, that concern is understandable. It's almost like doom and gloom reporting sells. It's true that the market isn't the same chaos that it was a few months ago with skyrocketing prices and bidding wars everywhere. The market has slowed. In today's video, I'm going to give you some resources to determine whether the shifting market is a time to pause your purchasing plans or whether it's a buying opportunity. I've been expecting properties to flatline in value and potentially take a dip, although I've never felt a crash was in the cards, and I'll show you that updated data in just a minute. But what we really need to be asking ourselves is this slowdown the time to buy or the time to wait things out? Is this an opportunity to get into a market that's going to roar back to life the minute some of the crazy in the world normalizes? To answer this question, we're going to look at the financial dynamics of the Raleigh market in comparison with some of the other top markets that have been in the news. We're going to look at how the city is changing and how those changes will affect its livability and desirability in the future. And ultimately, we're going to decide whether Raleigh is still a good risk for buying real estate. First, let's look at what's happening in the Raleigh housing market. 1,503 homes sold in the month of September in Wake County, and at the time of this writing, we have 2,664 homes on the market, which means we've got 1.77 months of inventory. It would take 53 days to sell every single home on the market if they keep selling at the same rate. And this has remained stable over the last 3 months. Even as interest rates have increased, the ratio of inventory to purchases has remained about the same, and we've hovered at just under 2 months of inventory active at any given time. Just as a refresher, this is what inventory looked like in the third quarter when comparing the pre-pandemic market to today. Remember that home prices are largely determined by the relationship of supply to demand. Homes in Raleigh are still in relatively short supply, but what about demand for those houses? I think a lot of people feel like the demand has totally dropped off with the interest rate hikes, but the truth is the rates have simply limited demand. There still is and continues to be a strong demand for housing here in Raleigh. I'm going to show you concrete evidence in just a minute that the supply of homes has not yet caught up to the number of buyers shopping for homes in the triangle. Demand is still higher than supply. And I've shown you this before, but it bears repeating. Before the 2008 housing crash, at the lowest point of inventory in December 2006, we had 4.7 months of inventory. And in the peak of the housing crash, April 2011, when inventory was at its highest, we had 13 months of inventory. The next thing I like to look at is showing data. You can see that in the spring of 2021 and the spring of 22, we had an astronomical number of showings. The peak of 2022, we were getting about 18 showings per listing, and in the peak of 2021, we were getting 21 showings. But again, if you go back to the pre-pandemic market, which please remember, the pre-pandemic market was a hot market. We were seeing multiple offers, bidding wars. We didn't know it could get as crazy as it did in the last couple of years, but we considered it a hot market at that time. Anyway, in this normal hot market in the spring, you would expect 8 to 9 showings per listing, and in the month of September, you would expect 5.7 showings per listing. Last month, September 2022, properties received on average 6.9 showings per listing. That's proof of what I said earlier, that demand has not yet dropped off to pre-pandemic levels or to the amount of supply we actually have. We've just seen interest rates cross the 7% point, so we may still see more buyers drop out of the market if they continue to rise, but please understand that there's still room for more buyers to drop out and still remain a seller's market. Yes, even if more buyers drop out. So supply remains low and demand remains high. We should not expect housing prices to fall, but in order to understand what's going to happen in the future, we have to look at population growth trends compared to other cities across the U.S. Will demand in the Raleigh market slow down, or could demand actually increase? This is going to be mind-blowing, you guys. When you see what actually could happen here, you might have a complete mind shift for how you view the real estate market. But before we look at the population projections, let's take a look at how developers are preparing for the coming population explosion. All of these supply and demand dynamics in Raleigh have created a very bullish real estate market for developers. While housing purchases might be slowing down from the pandemic peaks, developers are still behaving like there's an underserved market for commercial and mixed-use development. There are a few projects in the Triangle that I think illustrate what developers believe people want and are going to make a big impact on the feel of the city. The first one is Hub RTP. RTP is the largest research and innovation park in the United States. It encompasses a wide range of innovative industries: ag tech, fintech, clean tech. You might not know this if you don't live here, but RTP is like a big suburb. Everything is really spread out and the buildings are fairly low. It's not like a city at all. The Hub RTP is a 100-acre revitalization project that will encompass office, residential, retail, hotel, and green space, and it's going to be the first high-rise in Research Triangle Park. This development is going to create that walkable, urban, live, work, play, city feel that people are really wanting. There's going to be a creekside boardwalk, 20 miles of walking trails, 220,000 square feet of cutting-edge lab and research space, 1,200 apartments, and currently, I don't see any plans for residential homes for purchase, just rentals. These developments are indicative of what developers believe is going to happen. More people requires denser development. Midtown Exchange is a huge development that will spread pretty much from Wake Forest Road to North Hills. Again, this area is currently the epitome of suburban sprawl, lots of older strip mall type development, lots of business to business stuff without much lifestyle development happening east of North Hills. Midtown Exchange is going to change all of that. Again, the live, work, play feel is the rule, with office space, retail and dining, green space, and over 1,200 residential units naturally coexisting. Midtown Exchange will offer both condos and boutique apartment rentals. Again, the dynamic of density and lower percentages of homes for purchase by individuals. And I've got a theory about all this apartment construction. Raleigh has historically been a market where the majority of people own their homes because historically it's been cheaper to own than rent. But as land gets more expensive, it becomes more financially viable to build apartments, which are not only denser, but generally cost a lot less to build than condos. This means that as land costs go up in the Triangle, home ownership rates will go down. Keep this in the back of your mind because I'll revisit this idea in just a minute when we get to the population projections, but let's look at one more development in Raleigh first. 400H off Hillsborough Street is adding to the skyline and the urban feel of a city that's quickly transforming from a sleepy suburban town into a genuine city. And all this development is evolving to support the impending growth of the second fastest growing city in America, and believe it or not, that city is Raleigh. As I've said in other videos, I keep my eyes on these developers. They're putting hundreds of millions of dollars at risk because they believe that people will be enjoying these resources they're building. In order for these developments to be profitable, there must be a critical mass of people, and those people need to have disposable income. If this doesn't happen, the commercial spaces won't be attractive to individual business owners. These are the same dynamics that need to happen if the housing market is going to flourish. Seeing the developers willing to take these risks makes me more likely to lean in that direction when it comes to housing projections. During that 2008 housing crash, developers stopped building and projects went on hold. I'm not seeing that happen today. And again, I don't see any residential for purchase in this development, only rentals. Now let's take a look at those population projections so you can see what the developers are seeing. Nationally, there are 384 metropolitan statistical areas, or MSAs. This is basically an area with a core city of at least 50,000 people. The fastest growing MSAs are growing at double the national average rate for growth. And remember, this growth rate is based on population growth, not housing prices or housing growth, although obviously the two are connected. There are 16 metros across the country that met this definition as a fastest growing MSA. 2 are in North Carolina, Raleigh and Charlotte. Texas and Florida are the only other states with multiple large and fast growing metro areas. Raleigh is the second fastest growing large metro area in the US, and Charlotte is the 8th. Now, let's look at housing inventory in light of the growth that is coming to North Carolina. There were a total of 8,620 building permits issued in Wake County in 2021. In 2019, before the pandemic, over 8,000 permits were issued. Now listen to this. Wake County projects that it will need between 125,000 and 175,000 new housing units over the next 10 to 15 years. On the high side of that estimate, we'll need 17,500 housing units per year. On the low side, we'll need 8,300 units per year. In 2021, only 5,200 of the housing units built were single-family homes. The rest were multi-family units, which included housing of various kinds: apartments, dormitories, duplexes. It was really hard to tease out this information to find exactly what the multifamily consisted of, but I think it's fair to say that the vast majority of those multifamily were not homes for purchase by individuals. They were likely rentals, because we're just not seeing a lot of condo development on the ground. Not that rentals and community housing isn't very necessary, but since this channel is about the trends of buying and selling homes in the Triangle, I want to focus on how all of this will impact homeowners and home purchasers in the coming years. It's just a hunch, but given the rental inventory and the commercial developments that we just saw, I have the feeling that the ratio of available single-family homes for purchase is going to be pretty quickly outpaced by residential multifamily housing for rent. But let's get back to the population growth. If the lower side of the needed housing projections are correct, and if 2021 is a good measurement of how much housing we can crank out in a given year, there's going to be about 5,200 homes per year available to support the growing Raleigh population. If that is the case, supply and demand will remain about the same ratios that it currently is, and the market will stay roughly as the market is now, which is still a strong seller's market, but not so crazy that buyers are getting bid out, at least not in most properties. If the higher range of the population projections is more correct, we're in serious trouble with housing. We just don't have enough of it, especially single-family housing for purchase. But that's not the worst of it. If we really will need 17,000 housing units per year and we're only building 5,200 single-family homes, and the majority of the multifamily is rental housing, that means less than 30% of people needing housing will have the option of choosing a home for purchase. Let's be real. What do you think that's going to do to housing prices? Now, who can really tell how many people will actually move to Raleigh over the next 10 years? But it might be helpful to know that over the last 10 years, Wake County has been the third fastest growing county in the U.S. behind Collin and Travis counties, which are home to Dallas and Austin. Since the pandemic, Wake County has risen to the number 2 fastest growing county. I think it's important to note that Wake County had a median home price that was 17% below Travis County and 10% below Collin County over the last year. And do you see how different the bubble is on these graphs? Wake County doesn't really have a bubble. It's not exactly a flat line either, but it certainly isn't tanking like many other locations. If you want to see what a really volatile real estate market looks like, take a look at Boise. In my opinion, the only thing that should prevent someone from purchasing a home, whether for their own place to live or for an investment property in the Triangle, is if you're not financially prepared to buy. That means you should have enough for a down payment and closing costs, some emergency funds set aside, as well as a cushion for some home maintenance. Now, I want to address the crime situation because obviously quality of life is the most important factor for pretty much anyone moving anywhere. So we're going to look at crime, particularly shootings here in Raleigh, and we're going to compare it to some of the other popular cities that people are moving to or people are moving here from. Like I said at the beginning, we had what was classified as a mass shooting on Thursday, which is generally when there are 4 or more people shot in one incident. In this case, it was 5 people. And while this is incredibly tragic, I want people to understand how incredibly out of the norm this is for the Raleigh area. It's so out of the norm that when there's one shooting, it makes the news. That kind of violence is still considered shocking here, and I know in many cities it isn't. As a matter of fact, you can follow the Raleigh Police Department on Facebook, and anytime there's a shooting, they post about it. But let's take a look at this data. We're looking both at raw numbers, but I also pulled the population numbers so we can see shootings as a percent of the population. Dallas has the highest number of shootings per year at 1,290. San Jose is next at 674 shootings, and Austin is third with 315 shootings. This data was gathered over the past 6 months. The number of shootings definitely correlates to the size of the city, but when you look at the rate of shootings per population, you can really tell that the bigger the city is, the higher the crime rate. But I want you to know that this is a correlation, not causative. You know, anytime I start digging into things, I find more questions than answers, but I don't have time right now to address all of that, but I definitely will be doing another video on crime in the future. But for now, let's look at Raleigh and Durham compared to the 3 cities we just saw. Raleigh has had 13 shootings over the last 6 months, and Durham has had 14. So based on population, Raleigh had 1 shooting in 36,900 955 people. Durham had one shooting in 21,039 people. Austin had one shooting in 3,162 people. San Jose had one shooting in 1,523 people, and Dallas had one shooting every 1,011 people. I would never want to downplay a tragedy, but it would be wrong to get the impression that somehow this is normal in Raleigh or a sign of things to come. Raleigh is and continues to be a very low crime city. Do you feel differently about Raleigh after watching this video? Let me know in the comments, and if you like this video, you might also like this one about whether Cary is still worth it.